Good evening and welcome to this evening's informational session on the potential sales tax increase that our council is considering to balance our 25-26 budget. Before we begin this evening, I would like to introduce myself. First, I'm City Manager Jeff Barton, and to the left of me, I've got Budget and Research Director Amber Williamson. And I would also like to introduce our interpreter for this evening, Mr. Mario Barajas. Mario?
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mario Barajas. I'm going to be serving as a Spanish interpreter for our Spanish-speaking residents. I'm going to take a moment to introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking residents. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Mario Barajas. Yo voy a estar sirviéndoles como intérprete a los de habla hispana. Quisiera repasar un par de puntitos que pudiéramos ofrecerles para que les podamos interpretar la mejor manera posible. Primeramente, si es que van a dar un comentario, favor de hablar lentamente y claramente. Así de esa manera podemos interpretarles de la mejor manera posible. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Mario. Okay, so getting back to this evening. So tonight we're here. What we're talking about is not easy for the council nor staff to consider, but raising sales tax is never something that the council and our elected officials as a whole body like to consider doing. But last year we did discuss that the 25-26 budget was going to be facing some turbulent times as a result of some of the actions that were taken by the state legislature, as well as just the overall economy. So back on January 15th, council gave us the ability and authorized our ability to post a notice of a potential intent of theirs for consideration of a sales tax increase of up to 0.5%. Again, some of the things that we'll be talking to you this evening about are the things that drove that decision. Largely, the state's decision last year to reduce and eliminate cities and towns' ability to collect residential rental tax. That had a very detrimental effect on the city of Phoenix, and Amber will walk you through what that looks like on an annual basis through fiscal year 27-28. It's approximately a $300 million loss. The state also took another action back under the leadership of former Governor Doug Ducey to reduce the income tax to a flat tax rate. That is also negatively impairing our operating revenues that come into our general fund budget to support programs and services. We also know, as a result of some of our expiring federal funds, such as ARPA, we've got various ARPA programs that were funded with the $396 million American Rescue Plan Act funds that we received that are now starting to come to a close and starting to expire. First and foremost, I'd like to mention what we've done with those funds to support our homeless activities for those folks that are unsheltered. Our Office of Homeless Solutions Director, Rachel Milne, is in the audience. They've done a phenomenal job over the last several years since COVID, adding over 1,000 beds, and specifically last year and this year is projected to add another 700 plus beds. We know that the footprint of our Homeless Solutions Services programs are about $25 to $27 million annually. And as those grant funds come to an expiration date, we know that we need to transition those funds to the general fund. So that is also putting upward pressure on our on our ability to provide those services. And then beyond that, we can look to our left, to our west, our friends in California, unfortunately, as a result of some of the wildfires that they've experienced, as well as some of the concerns that have been addressed and brought to council by our own Phoenix Fire Department. We know that response times for Phoenix Fire are not where we'd like them to be, and so we need to make some investments in fire. And so you'll hear us talk about that over the next couple of months as we start building that 25-26 budget. So tonight, what we want to do is just level set, provide you with some background information on some of the decision points that our council will be wrestling with, as well as just give you more information historically on the city of Phoenix, our budget, and where things stand. We will take our next action to council will be on February 25th, and Amber will walk you through that. That's where we'll present to the council and to the community our general fund status for fiscal year 25-26, as well as our multi-year forecast that runs through fiscal year 27-28. Then we'll come back on March 18th with the city manager's trial budget, which is the first indication of how we plan to balance that budget for 25-26. And on that same day, right now, council is scheduled to take action on our sales tax request. And then following that, we'll do our legal adoption process in May and June. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Amber, and she'll walk you through some slides with information.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff. Good evening. So I'd like to start by providing an overview of our current fiscal 24-25 city budget. Our budget is $7.2 billion, and it's primarily made up of 3 different funds. Our first fund, the general fund, that's our unrestricted fund that provides for core programs and services such as police, fire, parks, libraries, and human services. Our next fund, special revenue funds, that makes up about 39%. These are our voter-approved funds for things like transportation, public safety, parks and preserves. Also includes our grants and Arizona highway user revenues. Our enterprise funds, 32% of our budget. These operate more like a business. They generate the revenues from people who directly use their services. So you can think of Sky Harbor Airport, water, wastewater, and solid waste. Focusing on our general fund for the current fiscal year, our revenues are derived primarily from local sales and excise taxes, about 40% of our revenue. 38% of our revenue is provided by state-shared revenues for sales tax, income tax, and vehicle license tax. State-shared revenues are not controlled by our council. Those are dictated by state statute. For primary property taxes, that makes up about 12% of our general fund revenue. That revenue category is also maximized. Our city council cannot increase primary property taxes. And then our last category, user fees and other, about 10%. Primary categories in this category are ambulance billing. Those rates are actually set by the Department of Health Services, and then also interest earnings. So for our general fund operating budget, our expenditures, they're primarily made up of 61% for public safety, for police, fire, and emergency management. Our general fund budget is just over $2 billion. Our next category at 12% is community enrichment. This is made up of parks, libraries, and human services. General government's about 11%. This is our administrative type functions, also includes our mayor, council, and our city manager's office. 9% is for criminal justice, community development, environmental services, transportation. And then about 7% of our budget is for our contingency or rainy day fund. I wanted to talk through just how much growth the city of Phoenix has experienced since roughly 1980. As you know, if you've been here a long time, you've seen that growth. Our population has more than doubled since that time. The square miles, or the area in which we have to provide services, has also significantly increased to almost 520 square miles today. The total number of streets has increased that we need to maintain and build. Number of parks and libraries have also grown. Our calls for service for public safety, for police and fire, have increased during this time due to increases in population. The number of fleet that we have to maintain in our city for our city vehicles has also grown. Number of building inspections. What I think is really interesting, however, is our total city employees today, while it's grown, our per capita, or per 1,000 population, our number of city employees is actually fewer today than it was back in 1980. I think this really demonstrates the council and prior city council's efforts to try to limit government and to keep our costs low. Unfortunately, as our city manager has explained, the state has taken some actions which limit our local control and will diminish our tax base going forward. They did this through Senate Bill 1131. That was effective in January of this year. It eliminates residential rental sales tax. That is a revenue stream that the city's relied on for many years. It impacts our general fund and special revenue funds. Senate Bill 1828, this is the flat tax. Individual income tax rates were lowered to the current 2.5%. That revenue is allocated entirely to our general fund. For our residential rental, the loss that we're going to experience as a result of state action, I wanted to provide some estimates of the annual revenue that we will experience a decline in. So in the current year, it's a partial year impact. You can see by fund which funds are affected. $18.5 million loss in the current year to our general fund. All funds, $35.4 million. Next year in fiscal 25-26, we'll see that first annual loss, $44.6 million, ongoing to our general fund, $85.5 million, all funds. As you move through our forecast horizon through fiscal 27-28, over $300 million estimated loss to the city of Phoenix. For state shared income taxes, because primarily of that flat tax to the 2.5, we are going to experience declines in state shared revenue for this category. You can see last fiscal year we collected $436 million. This fiscal year we'll collect $351 million for a year-over-year decline of 19%. We're going to experience more declines in 25-26 before we start seeing this revenue as our stream estimated to increase. We rely on the state's Joint Legislative Budget Committee for these numbers, but unfortunately, this is putting a lot of pressure on our general fund budget from that state action. So other budget challenges and unfunded needs that the council will have to consider as they move forward to adopt a balanced budget for next fiscal year. Inflation. So just as it's affected every resident in terms of rising costs, the city of Phoenix has also experienced significant increases in our expenses since the pandemic. For fire department, our emergency response times, they are higher than the national standard that they're trying to achieve, which is 5 minutes or less 90% of the time. So for example, fire response times have increased from 6 minutes and 48 seconds in 2015 to 7 minutes and 23 seconds. So fire is going to need more resources in order to bring those response times down. For homelessness, our Office of Homeless Solutions has done a great job addressing the need for unsheltered individuals, strategically using those American Rescue Plan Act dollars, which are expiring, as Jeff had indicated. We're going to need to move those dollars into our general fund, which is going to increase our ongoing operating expenses to continue the good work that they're doing. Voters also approved the 2023 General Obligation Bond Program. This was great news for the city. It was sorely needed, adding fire stations, parks, libraries, community centers, splash pads, street repairs, all kinds of exciting things in that program. But with the GO bond program comes increased operating costs, so we're going to need to build those expenses into our general fund budget as well as these facilities open up and come online. And then unfortunately, general fund revenues overall, at 6 months actually current into the fiscal year, we are starting to see our revenues slow. So we're having to bring down our revenue estimates, which is going to put further pressure on our budget. And then last but certainly not least, community expectations and requests for more service. In all the years I've been in the budget office and dealing with the community and talking with our elected officials, residents don't want less service and they don't want inferior service. They want exceptional service and more of it. So we need to make sure we have ongoing resources available to provide those services to the residents. So in terms of the transaction privilege tax rate, I wanted to walk through the history of the rate and to demonstrate that for our general fund, the rate has been 1.2% since 1986. It has not increased since that time. The rate has gone up, but it's been for specific voter-approved reasons. As you can see, to the current 2.3% last increased in 2016. It's been increased over the years for transportation, public safety, and parks and preserves. I also wanted to provide a comparison of how does the city of Phoenix compare to our surrounding cities in terms of our TPT rate for our largest tax base, which is retail. So as you can see, Phoenix is currently at 2.3%. We're lower than 6 other surrounding cities. If the city council were to make a vote on March 18th to increase that rate to the full 2.8, we would be equal with Surprise and lower than Glendale and Buckeye. So I also wanted to walk through what does this mean if the city council were to increase the TPT rate? How would it impact an individual who is purchasing a taxable good? So for the taxable purchase of $100 at the current rate of 2.3%, you would pay $102.30. If the rate was increased to 2.8%, you would pay $102.80 for an increase of 50 cents. For each transaction that's taxable valued at $1,000, you would pay $5 more. And each transaction valued at $10,000, you would pay $50 more. To provide some more examples for items that might be taxable that you might purchase, a cup of black coffee at $2.10. If council increases that rate to the 2.8, you're going to pay 1 more penny for that cup of coffee. To go out to the movies for 2 adults and 2 children, you would pay 19 more cents. For a family dinner for 4, valued at $80, you would pay 40 more cents if the rate were increased to 2.8%. And then for a washer and dryer at approximately $1,100, you would pay $5.48 more. And then for a used vehicle valued at almost $13,000, you would pay $64.98. So in terms of next steps of where do we go from here with the budget and council consideration of a TPT increase. On February 25th, Jeff and I will be presenting an updated status for next fiscal year along with a multi-year forecast. On February 27th, we will post the public notice of intent for a TPT increase. And then on March 18th, Jeff and I will present the 25-26 proposed trial budget. That is when the council will hold the required public hearing and then possibly make action on a TPT increase. And with that, we can answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank everyone for coming out this evening. Travel safe.
Thank you.